Then let me welcome you again. You're here in the session on visiting fellows and navigating careers in the US and internationally. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Ulli Klenke. I am working at the Office of Intramural Training and Education, and there I am the director of the Amgen Scholars Program, and I'm also a program specialist working in the postdoc office. And one of the things I do the most is working with visiting fellows. So why do I do that? I do that because I used to be one myself, and so I know how it is to sit in your boat and what it means to have a visa and have to deal with the visa situation and how I have to navigate a job search. Like, do I want to go back home? Do I want to stay? All these things are very familiar I am very familiar with. I stayed for about 5 years at NINDS as a postdoc, and then tagged on visiting a research fellow position. And yes, it was never easy to really navigate that. So I'd like to talk a little bit more today about some things that helped me back then, and that's some resources and materials that we are using these days to help people that are in that situation. So, your current position is most likely a postdoc or you're a graduate student, and you're asking yourself, where are you heading next? What are you going to do? Do you stay in the US? You want to find a career there? Or do you want to go abroad and find a position either back home or somewhere else globally where you can work and find your passion and do what you really like to do? So this presentation is going to give you a few steps and ideas of what you need to do. And we will also talk a little bit about timeline, because that, as an international person, is super important to consider. So here is a little snapshot of former 70 NIH postdocs and where they ended up being. Many of them went back to France. Some of them went back, some of them looked for position elsewhere, but they're all over the globe. There are people in Europe, there are people in Asia, there are people in Australia, Africa, and South America. You can see American postdocs go all over the world globally. And I think that is a wonderful thing. And I think that is really supportive of the notion that you can find the work where you want to be next. But how can you get career ready for that? I think that's a good question. So during the past 2 days, we've highlighted so many different career paths that you can choose at this symposium. And many of those jobs are available in the US as well as globally. However, now you need to identify which research and career opportunities in the area that you want to live and work in. And one of the most important things is establishing helpful relationships. And I think, during the past 2 days, one thing I really heard over and over is, getting positions, you need to network, you need to know people, you need to know somebody in that industry, in that company, at the governmental arm that you're interested in, to find a way in. So that is something that is really important to do. You need to create effective job material. You need to know where to look for jobs. You need to understand how job how job positions are worded so that you can reuse those words when you apply. You have to find out how material needs to look like. Is there a CV that needs to be submitted? Is there resumes that need to be submitted? All that is creating effective job search materials. And then you need to create other materials, possibly, like you need things that support qualifications that you have gotten maybe outside of your work as a postdoc, as a graduate student, that might support why you're a very skilled worker and should get a visa. Things like that are important. If you have a family, you might need to collect some information that can support why you need to bring your family or why your spouse would need to work there as well. So things like that are also important for you to consider. You need to be aware of the rules and regulations that are important in the country that you want to work with to obtain a work visa and for your family. And lastly, I think you really need to be aware of the culture and the language and how you will navigate it when you get to the point that you're moving into that new country or that old country that you might already know, that might have changed. As I said, I was an international fellow myself. I'm from Germany. I've left Germany a long time ago, and I think it has changed tremendously in the time that I've left. So that is something that you also need to consider when you think about it. So let's start talking a little bit about the job search timeline that is super important for people who are looking at visa situations. And that is not just people who want to move into a new country and might need a visa, but that is also for people like Americans, if they want to work globally and abroad, who need to figure out how that visa situation works for them. So about 24 months out from the end of your training, from the end date of your current position, you need to really start networking. And that's why, like, coming to the Career Symposium right now, you can connect to the speakers that work there. We have a lot of international speakers today you can connect with to create a more global network, but that is something that is really super important. The other side is that you really need to start figuring out, what do you want to do next? Like, what is it that you're interested in? Where can you see yourself? Do you want to go the academic route? Do you want to go into science communication? Where do you see yourself? That is something that you should start figuring out in the middle of wherever you are in terms of a postdoc or a graduate student. And that will be super helpful if you want to do a global move. And then around 12 to 18 months out to the end date, you really need to start increasing your efforts in networking and need to become a little bit more strategic with your search terms and the people you talk to, so that you can really like hone down and get to the bottom of where you see yourself and what you want to look for in the next position. Starting to like update your search materials, updating your CV, your resume, creating those needed materials that support what the skills that you have is really important. Like getting that certificate from wherever you took a class or something like that, so that you have it ready to go when you actually are applying for positions. That's also like getting prepared and learning more about how do you do an interview, how do you negotiate. All these practices take time and are super important so that you're actually better prepared when you're in the room or the Zoom call with that potential future employer. Then, like about a year from ending of your training, you need to like finish the way you work. You need to start finishing up your projects. You need to like finishing up your papers, things that when you leave the lab or the research group, that you're not leaving like an in-between project kind of thing. That will be super helpful for your PI that you're working with, but also for you to have that closure for the end of your position. And you need to intensify your job search at that point. And then, like 6 to 9 months, you will be interviewing, you will be having sent applications out and all that kind of stuff. And I heard in one of the talks in the career symposiums, one of the speakers was mentioning that, like it really depends on how many applications you send out if you like find a job. And I don't remember what number she said, but it was definitely a number in like the 20 to 30 kind of applications that you need to send out. And if you do it internationally, I think you might even need to up that number. But that's just my thought. And that's just my thought. However, if you are an international person working in the US right now and you are on a visa, then you really need to consider immigration timelines for remaining in the US and everything that is needed in that regards. And I have a slide that talks a little bit more about that later in the talk. So as I said before, all the careers that we have learned about in the last 2 days are global options. So it doesn't matter if you're interested in working in academics, if you want to work in the industry, if you want to have a government job. There, of course, is a little bit of a hitch. Sometimes government jobs, you have to be a citizen of the country that you want to work for. So you would have to find that out if they actually accept people that are on a visa or sponsor visas. But if you want to work in nonprofits, in science communication, science education, industry in regards to like the business of industry, tech transfer, things like that are available globally. And so deciding what type of job and then deciding what type of country would be a good point. But research focused or adjacent, everything is available to you globally. Of course, you have to also decide if you have a willingness to move abroad without a job, if that is an option. Sometimes it might be easier to find a position when you're in country, but that is, of course, something that you have to be comfortable with if you want or can do that. So who can help you find a job, or actually who can more help you find within your job search? If you at your institution have a career center or any type of counselors that does support and have career coaches, please make an appointment and talk to them. There are career coaches out there. They can really help you create that personalized plan that will work for you. They can help you make those career decisions. They can point out pros and cons. They can brainstorm with you, which is super helpful. They will help you with your resume or CV, and they can help you with mock interviews, which is super supportive. And they can also give you a little bit of tips how to do networking really well and be strategic about it. And I also have a little bit more information on that. However, if you don't have a career services, what are you supposed to do? You know, talk to your mentors, talk to people that you know who've had an interesting career path that you know about. Participate in career development opportunities that maybe societies have for you. You're going to a conference, and for example, I'm a neuroscientist by training. The Society for Neuroscience at their meetings always have career talks, and they always have support that they give specifically trainees, students, to help them find their career path. And so don't underestimate the support that is out there that you can find to get a little bit more help with your job search. Another good way to learn about different careers is something called informational interviews. So when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I did about 40 of them. An informational interview is something where you can find how people did what they're doing right now in their current job, like what are their duties and occupation and responsibilities. But it also gives you a lot of information about what skills did they bring into that job? What career path did they do that they ended up where they are? It also tells you a little bit about like, what's the salary like, or what's the benefits, and what are the advancement opportunities in those things, and maybe things that don't work so well in their job. And it's really a wonderful opportunity for you to ask questions without people having to give you a job. So it's a low-key conversation. You're not asking for a job, you're just asking about their job, and you build a wonderful network that way. And as I said, I did about 40 of them. I talked to people who do science writing. I talked to people who work at small colleges and have a more teaching and less research related position. I talked to people who do tech transfer. I talked to people who are in government positions and do maybe, you know, organize the review panels for the NIH. And a lot of times I walked away and said, no, that's not for me. And that was as helpful as the ones where I said, oh, I could see myself doing that. But it's really wonderful to figure out more. And you heard a lot of this in the Career Symposium in the past 2 days, because in the rooms, I heard a lot of questions about, tell me about your current position. And I heard a lot of questions about, how did you get into the field? And where do you see yourself going from there? All those questions that we had in those breakout rooms are very indicative of an informational interview. The best thing is, at the end of one of those, you can always ask, you know, like, do you know somebody else I should talk to, which is going to build your network? Do you know a professional society I should be joining that could be supportive? They are a lot of information that these people have during that interview that will help you with your job search. And it's a wonderful opportunity. So I've talked about going abroad. So how do you do that when you're on this side of the pond and you want to go somewhere else? So how do you build that network, and how do you connect? So I as I said, I left Germany and I did my master's there. So I was actually well connected back then with my university. But then a few years in, I never really had reached out. And when I was looking for a position, turned out that I did not have that many connections anymore with the people that I used to know. But it was interesting. Whoever I reached out to from back then was always willing to talk. And they were always like, oh yeah, this is wonderful. What happened? Where have you been? And so there was a lot of connection, and they were able to connect me. So your former university mates, current colleagues that you're like, if you have international collaborations, those are wonderful people to talk to. At face-to-face conferences or even on Zoom, you meet people who are possibly in the country that you're interested in working on, and you can make these connections. LinkedIn is wonderful. You can always reach out to people and ask for informational interviews, and many are willing to talk about their position. And it's a great experience. Following people on Facebook and Twitter can help you. And then don't underestimate career services abroad. For example, I know that the Karolinska Institute in Sweden has a very similar career setup office than we have at OITE. And that is, if you reach out to them and talk to them about it, that you're interested in working in Sweden, and if they could help you and give you some information, they will make an appointment with you. Then there's nonprofit organizations that actually help to repatriate or recruit people. Very big is Euraccess, which has hubs all over the world, even though they're funded by the European Union. They have a hub in North America and South America, in Asia, in Australia. They are really all over the place, and they are wonderful to work with, and they have a lot of resources on their website. The German Scholars Organization is wonderful in support, and you can make a free appointment with them and have them give you some information. In India, there's the India Bioscience Organization, who is also supporting postdocs and graduate students if they're looking for positions in India, for example. There's diasporas that are created by countries that really want scientists to come to their country or come back. And they are usually located at the local embassies that you can reach out to. Many of the embassies in DC have science talks and receptions that you can join for free. The NIH has a country group, countries at NIH groups that you can reach out to. And you can just have, when you talk to people, you can have them watch for positions that they can find only in country and that they can let you know about. So building that network to get to jobs. The next important factor is like preparing the right job search materials. So when you create your resume and your CV, you need to know the specific structure and formatting content of the country that you want to apply to. For example, in Germany, you have to have a picture in your application, which you do not have to have in the United States. I know from some people at administration offices in Germany that say, if that application isn't formatted the proper way, or is missing a photo, or is missing a letter of recommendation within the package, then that will go to the bottom of the pile. So you want to make sure that your application is at the top of the pile. And you do that by making sure that everything that needs to be there is there. So down here is a little table that shows you exactly, for example, for those countries there, what is needed in that application. So you really need to make sure that you have that, and that you know that if that country is not here. As I said, Euraccess is wonderful for that. They have a lot of information on that, and it will be super helpful. So make sure that you understand how a cover letter needs to be done, how your certificates and diplomas need to be submitted. Does it have to be a picture that is maybe notarized so that they can see that it is a true copy of your certificate? All these things are important, and you need to make sure that you know it. So now you have everything prepared. You have your network. Where do you find those positions except from your network? So there is quite a lot of general websites available that you can look for. Nature and science career jobs are globally and all over the world. Indeed, you can sort for country-specific jobs. Euraccess is posting a lot of jobs and also a lot of fellowships that you can apply to. They have a lot of information, for example, about the Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellowship that gives you a grant to work into a different country. It gives you information about the ERC grants, so grants that you can apply to be able to move with money into a different country. These things are available. For India, there's indiabioscience.org. There's employment news in health biotech. In China, we know about the Chinese Student and Scholar Association. And you know what? It would be awesome if you know of a site that we haven't mentioned here, if you could put that in the chat so that we can share it with everybody who is on the call right now. Because I think it would be really helpful. If you have a resource that other people could use too, then please be willing and share. I see that there's numbers going up in the chat, so that's wonderful. Thank you. So now you have prepared your job, you have looked for your job, and now you really want to move. So you do need to understand the logistics of a move. Make sure that you go to the embassy of the country that you want to move to, that you know about the visas that you will need, especially if you go with a spouse or family. Have local knowledge what the work requirements are like. You either get that from your network or the people, the HR that you're working with, but be aware of like, how does retirement work there? How does, is there equivalent to a social security number? What is the benefits like? Do you, if you intend to come back and you just want to go abroad for a few years, like, is that transferable back to wherever you live and want to work later? Things like that are important. And again, I can just plug for your Rexes again, because they do have somebody around the world that you can talk to. And in each country, they actually have somebody who is sort of like a greeter that you can talk to specifically about that country and how that works there. So it's really wonderful. So now you make that decision. No, I want to actually stay in the United States. What does that mean? So the majority of postdocs are on a J1 visa. If you're working for the NIH, you're on a J1 visa with a stay home requirement. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider to be able to stay in the US and work in your next job. So you have to understand that process, and that is the key to make it work. The biggest thing is you need to have an idea about the timeline for your visa. So understanding the H-1B visa path is also absolutely imperative, because there is the H-1B visas for the academic pathway and route that are not capped. And, you know, like a lot of universities are willing to create that. And it is usually not a problem. However, if you want to go into industry, you need to understand that there's a cap for each of the subjects. And there's maybe about 65,000 visas a year, and you have to apply, you know, like before January, because the visas are given out in about the first 3 months. And then when the cap is reached, it's done. So if you decide in August you want to go into industry in the United States and need an H-1B visa, you will have to wait until the next year it opens again with those capped H-1Bs. So those are really important informations to make sure that you are on the right timeline looking for your position. There's other visas than the H-1B. There's O visas. There's so many numbers and letters that I can't even remember. And it's very unique to you. You know, it depends on the country you're coming from. It depends how long you were here. It depends on the visa that you're on right now. If you're a graduate student, you might be on an F visa. If you're working as a postdoc, you might still be on your F visa with an OPT. There's just so many unique things to your situation that it is really hard to give visa advice, and we are not allowed to because we're the government. And so it's really important that you work with your resources. You need to go to your see that my English is losing me. So at the NIH, it's like the Division for Immigration Services. And I'm sure the people who work with you at their institutions with your visa, those are the knowledgeable people who can help you and give you advice of what you need to do in your specific situation. There is resources online. You can definitely go to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS website, to look what they are saying, what kind of visas are out there that you might qualify for. As I said, your visa office or an attorney that is specialized on immigration will be able to help and answer your questions and with your next steps. And then there's something called myvisajobs.com, which is focusing mainly on H-1B. But they, for example, give you a good idea of what companies are sponsoring H-1B visas, so that you don't like have to like go straight and ask, you know, like when you're applying for a job, you're like, do you actually supply visas for international people. But I know that is a very, very important factor, and so something to consider. So, and this is bringing me to the end of my presentation. And so I've listed here a couple of resources that we have on our website. We have a blog, and this is really wonderful material if you want to learn a little bit about resumes and CV, interviewing, networking, and other skills that you can check out. And then, of course, you can always, here, I need to switch the slide, of course. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat. You can seek out the speakers who participated in the career symposium. You know, like they're all on Hoover. Most of them are on LinkedIn. Reach out, start building your network, ask about the positions. That is going to be the best way to find out what you need to know. You can watch also OITE careers workshops, including many on what I just said, CVs, resumes, and cover letters. Read our blog. We post a lot about that as well. And again, if you have questions, just ask me via email. And now it's time for questions in general. And so I'm going to stop sharing